Welcome to
4Kids Flashback.
We're gonna Jamie
Hello.
Taco. Sorry.
You're gonna what? What?
Jamie Taco. I don't know if you watch. I think you should leave.
Oh, no, I need to. I
Okay.
need to watch that. Hi, I'm Tara Sands. Welcome to 4Kids Flashback. I am joined by my co-host.
Steve.
Your name
Yurko.
We got a little bit of a late start today because we signed on to Zoom and you want to tell them what happened?
I was already kind of like running late and like just like trying to do a million things right for this podcast, and then I'm getting ready. Dan Green interview. Familiar with a lot of his roles, and then I look at myself in the webcam and I'm like, oh, I'm wearing a Knuckles shirt. Not intentionally, because I was like, oh, I'm wearing a pandering shirt. That's exactly what I said. Because
Do you think it was subconscious, or you think it was really just completely random?
No, I was like, what's a shirt I haven't worn in a while, and it'll be comfy and stuff. And I just picked that Knuckles shirt. And then
we took a break while Steve changed his shirt.
So I was like, I'm not doing this.
What's on your shirt now?
It's Egbert from Devitt's Farms.
Way better. I mean, I don't think Dan would have been thought it was weird that you wore a shirt, but I understand not wanting to feel like a fanboy when you're interviewing somebody.
I'm a semi-professional podcaster now.
You are very professional, and so either Steve was going to leave his shirt on, and I was going to go get my Kaiba Corp sweatshirt, or we were just going to have Steve change.
Right. But
so
I was happy doing that. Luckily, it's the closet was right there. So, but I didn't want to just look like I'm a big fan and
I love you, Dan Green.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that. Didn't want to look like I was playing favorites either. So
he's heard it all. I was trying to remember. I think it was Brenda or someone in one of our interviews talked about that. Like someone had a crazy fan that like came up to the office. Oh, maybe someone.
Oh, that was Mike Pollock.
That was the Mike Pollock interview. It was a fan of Dan Green's, right? So
yeah.
Yeah. We have to ask him about that.
Think he'd be willing to chat about that?
He might not even know about it. No, because it was Mike Pollock's story.
Right. I'm sure Mike told him. Mike, because, I'm sure he did. It's if he even remembers. I just remember our Susie episode with how unfiltered Mike was, with just saying, oh, yeah, they hate you online.
But Mike was a loose cannon.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's hilarious. But yeah, so here we are. We're about to interview Dan Green. Very excited. I haven't seen him in person in a while. I guess I'm counting this as in person, even though it's really not. But we're psyched to see him. And before you listen to our interview with him, something cool that you could do is go to if you're listening to this on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a review. That would be so nice of you. Just
It'd be
hit
cool.
the 5 stars.
Cool. Yeah.
Be super cool.
And say something nice so it just doesn't look like we sent you there.
Yes. Say something like genuine and kind. Like us, and point to a specific thing you like what you love when we tell you to do this on the podcast. The other thing you could do, if you're feeling even more generous, is
go to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/4kidsflashback. Put that number 4 in there. Get that FOUR out of there.
Yeah.
And that goes for FOR and that goes for FORE. Is that the golf one?
Oh, yes, that is. That's the golf one.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. So many spellings of 4.
So if you go there, and if you like our show so much, you want to hear another episode a week early, ad-free, that's where you sign up there. It's just $5.
And by this point, by the time you hear this, we're going to have all these other perks. So go check out what those are.
Insert here. We're not going to do that.
Insert.
But
beep. Yeah. So that's what you could do. And here's Dan. All Our guest today is Dan Green. Now, obviously, Dan is best known for voicing Yugi in Yu-Gi-Oh!, Knuckles in Sonic X, Sky in Winx Club, Hudson Horstachio. God, that's a fun name to Hudson Horstachio. In
Right. It's literally a vocal warm-up. Yeah.
Hudson Horstachio.
You got it.
Thank you. But let me finish this glowing intro. But he did so much more than that during his time working at 4Kids. He also has narrated hundreds of books. He teaches voiceover. He co-hosts the podcast Heart of the Cards with Eric Stewart. And, little known fact, a lock of his hair was sold for 7 figures on eBay.
It's true.
It's not true at all.
It was an embarrassing amount of money for me to have to cough up, but I didn't want to look bad. So.
You spent 7 figures on your own hair.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
And when I make convention appearances, please be generous, because I got a lot of hair to sell to myself. Thank you.
Have you ever considered doing locks of love with your hair?
No, please don't give people ideas.
It is so flowy and beautiful.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you. It was actually not so much of a choice. I just stopped going to the barber, and then it became a look. So
you own it.
Well, I'd always not had long hair, and it's funny because now I feel like it just feels more like who I actually am. You know, it's like because I'm not.
I found some old pictures of you recently.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
It's like a different human. Okay, we're going to start with some very cliche, boring stuff that you've answered a million times.
Yes, at last.
Just to get into the swing of things. So I apologize in advance for,
That's okay. That's
for
fine.
this. But because we did get questions from fans, and some of them don't know your origin story. So,
right.
And what's fun is we've touched on some of your origin story with some of the other guests.
Well, when I was young, I was bitten by a radioactive voiceover artist. The rest is history.
I want that to be true. Oh, that would be great. Okay, so young Dan is living where?
So I grew up in Indiana, and for the most part, when I'm interacting with people at conventions and they might walk away with the idea that I'm a polite guy, I think I owe Indiana a lot of that. And when I get angry, I'm more like the New Jersey, New Yorker part of my background.
Yeah.
And then, when I was 15, I went from Indiana to New Jersey and have been on the East Coast ever since.
Wait, where were you in New Jersey?
So originally, my mom got a position at Rutgers University and had previously been working at Purdue University, we were in West Lafayette, Indiana, college town. Yeah, so... And
then
Highland
you ended
Park
up going to Rutgers.
Exactly, and that's where I met Tony and Greg, who I've been friends with forever, and I'm so grateful for them. And we all went to Mason Gross School of the Arts for acting.
And you were roommates, right?
I've lived with those guys more than anyone else that I'm not related to directly through blood.
Who is the messiest?
Me.
Really?
Yeah,
what?
It's a safe answer because those guys won't get mad at me. What's that?
Like what kind? Like messy,
kind of messy?
dirty, or like leaving stuff in the sink, or just like piles of stuff, or like dirty.
Yeah, well, I'd say that I'm probably not only is it the tactful answer to give, but it's probably true. And we had piles of laundry and stuff like that. One of the most embarrassing things I can say, and I won't give too many details, but in an apartment that we all lived in together. We paid one of our classmates to clean all of the dishes we had let pile up, and our classmate had to resort to the bathtub in order to get that job done.
You guys were filthy animals.
Yeah, for sure. But our immune systems are better developed because of it. Just kidding.
But maybe not. Maybe it's true. I'd like to. Well, you got bitten. I think
I got bitten by a radioactive pizza box.
That's right.
We left sitting for too long.
Ew, that is disgusting, especially knowing the bug situation in New York and New Jersey. Okay. This leads us right to 4Kids.
This is exactly what the fans want to hear about, I know.
But I want to ask something. I like those questions because that's not what we get asked all the time.
Oh, I know. Well, that's part of what Eric and I enjoy about the Heart of the Cards, which we were going to, I know we tried to schedule and things. You are so much better organized than we are with scheduling people.
So I'm very type A.
That's great, though. That's wonderful.
Yeah, ask Steve how much he enjoys my type A-ness working with me.
Did you just say anus? Okay.
Type
Your
A-ness.
tight anus?
I noticed that Steve
No
did not even
comment.
respond to that.
You know what? It's got to be the internet connection. That's why I was waiting.
Right.
That's what it is.
He's going nowhere near your tight anus. All right. You can cut this out, right?
You know what? F0.
F0.
Wait, do you actually want me to cut the type A-ness?
Oh, no. I'm
Okay.
fine with it if you are. Yeah.
Making sure.
That's A material, no pun intended. Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yeah.
Did Tony, we're talking about Tony Salerno, you guys, when we talk
Anthony
about Tony.
Hayden Salerno, as he sometimes goes by, but we knew him as Tony.
Yes. And so I know that he brought Greg in. Did he bring you in as well to the voiceover world?
Yeah, for sure. And we've been riding his coattails ever since. And so there was...
And the ATVs at what's his name's house?
Dan Rich's, for sure.
Yeah.
And I forget exactly what the anime was, but it wasn't, the top tier stuff. Tony needed some background voices. He's working at Central Park Media at the time, and so he says, "Hey, would you like to come in and do some background voices?" And even though I enjoy anime and animation generally, I was like, "Oh, that's okay." And then he said it pays $50 an hour, and I said, "Okay, sure, I will."
Yeah.
And and then that show was being paid for, the dubbing was being paid for by Central Park Media, but it was being recorded through Todd. Or wait. No, it was being recorded. I guess that one was at Matlin. Well, anyway.
Taj didn't have their own studio set up yet. They were in the process of
That's
building
what
it
was.
when they got Pokemon. So probably Buttons or one of those places. Yeah. And
I think I'm remembering this correctly. It just happened to be that something I had done that was a Central Park Media show was being mixed at Taj when the Pokemon stuff was happening, and I think one of the producers, said, "Hey, let's bring this guy in for something."
That kid's got talent.
Hey now.
Hey now. See, do you know what Hey Now is from? Do you say
that's
Now?
As I understand that's from the Gary Shandling show.
It is, yes.
Right, okay.
And I say it all the time.
Yeah.
And Steve did not know what it was when I said it, but I also know it as from Howard Stern because he says it all the time because of the Gary Shandling show.
So it's the same reference.
It's the same reference. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Hey now. So okay. So was when you were for those of you who don't know what Mason Gross School of the Arts is at Rutgers, it is the one of the most intense acting programs in the world.
It certainly was at the time. Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. I don't know now, but I guess during that time you like most of us, we wanted to be serious theater actors.
Yeah.
Was voiceover on your radar at all?
Not at all. I did well in voice class, but that was really about training the voice for theater, which is obviously, which is helped in certain ways and also something you got to get over when you do voiceover work and the audience is not at the back of the house. But not a thought in my mind about I didn't even understand that was something that was or even how to pursue that career, even if I wanted to. And I grew up at loving animation and the reruns of the 1960s Spider-Man. That voice is ingrained in my head.
Okay. Yeah.
And as well as many others. So, but no, I graduated from that, and it's like essentially a conservatory training, right? It's classical training, which to listeners, if they're not aware, it's not some mystic brew with animals' blood and, a secret society. Classical training merely means that there are three different disciplines. There's voice training, there's movement training, and there's acting training. And those are three principles that you really have to know what you're doing to be considered a well-trained and professionally trained actor. There are actual standards and stuff that you're expected to know. Anyway, so that was very much my mindset. And graduating from Rutgers, my agent teased me because I didn't want to be famous. I didn't want to be on TV, really. I wanted to be maybe a part of a repertory company and do, classic plays and maybe a new play here and now, but have a very modest life, somewhere out there in the country. And my agent was like, "Oh, so you want to go all the way to the middle?" great.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny because like Ted Lewis, when we talked to him, he
love
left.
Ted.
But yeah, he's the best. But he left Pokemon to go do a play in I don't remember, the middle of nowhere, which is so funny because that's what we thought we were as serious theater actors.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like if he would have just kept that role on Pokemon, he'd, who knows now? I mean, not that his life would be so much different, but we didn't know what we were getting involved in. We thought they were all going to be like those Central Park media shows and end up on a shelf somewhere.
Exactly. And there really was no reason why we should have expected to know what was going to happen because Pokemon was a phenomenon happening at the moment. And other shows, were a part of that. But it hadn't been previously established as a relevant a thing as it became. And still remains if we're just talking about Pokemon. So.
Right. I mean, we couldn't Google it like it was.
No. People sometimes ask, did you have any idea that, that it would become the sort of as relevant to as many people as it has? And I always say, absolutely not. And at the time, didn't expect it to become as popular as it was or be as I came in after it was already popular, right?
Right.
So, and that people would care about it decades later was even further from the realm of consideration. I was just trying not to get fired.
Yeah,
right?
That's all of us. Yeah, we're like, we have jobs. Thank God we have jobs. Yeah. Well, but then when you did Yu-Gi-Oh came after Pokemon, so did you have a different mindset going into that? Because you're like, oh, this company is making things people see.
Right. Well, yes, there was an awareness of that. And I had done the role of Entei in the third Pokemon movie prior to that. And I didn't know what to expect from Yu-Gi-Oh! And I wasn't the first choice. And
right. Yeah, we've actually talked about that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. With Lloyd Goldfine revealed all, but
right. He's still not satisfied with my performance.
No, he actually spoke very high. You'll have to listen to his interview.
Sweetheart. He's such a sweetheart.
He's great.
Yeah.
But that is so par for the course at 4Kids. Like, even though it was Greg's decision to leave and go do something, people being replaced at 4Kids and then being asked back and doing like.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that happened in Pokemon,
all the time.
All the time.
But it happened. I mean, my favorite example, Megan Hollingshead told this story where she was replaced on a show, but she didn't know. And then that girl decided to go on tour. So they brought her back. And they said, oh, yeah, we didn't like what you did, but then that girl left, so we figured we'd have you back.
Thank you?
Yeah, there was no sugarcoating.
Am I still not being liked?
It's so weird. But I have to say, and maybe it's true for you too, it like gave me kind of a thick skin and a sense of humor about it all.
Well, you certainly understand how non-precious you are.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and if you have work to do on letting go some ego, that'll help.
Yeah. I have none. Whatever the opposite of ego is what I have. So yeah, I think that's why so many of us became so close.
Well, how do you? No, I can imagine what you mean, but I'd be more interested to hear you say what do you mean by that? I think you know where you're going with that.
I think being part of first of all, a cultural phenomenon, like a show that big.
Yeah.
But also maybe not being treated so great at the same time, and it was a weird.
Yeah.
Like, let's say the Pokemon, is as big as Friends, the show Friends, right? And they all bond, but they're also learning how to get rich together and learning that we were learning how to we were scraping by in part of this huge thing.
Oh, for sure. And we were also enjoying a greater frequency of predictable income probably than we had, in our earlier 20s. And there's the bonus of you're becoming recognized in a certain way. So one of the ways they define one of the data they factor into how satisfied you are with the work that you're doing is how well appreciated do you feel, right? It's not all about the check. And that's certainly and again, to have people, I just came back from a convention this weekend, to have people say the kinds of things that they say, which are so generous, is a
so
reward.
nice.
Yeah.
I wonder how it would have served us to have those interactions back then, because
Right.
I didn't know how my things were being perceived, and now, and not that I would have changed anything, but I think I would have not that I didn't put heart into it, but it would have been so much more meaningful when I knew that there was a kid at home who didn't have any friends and this was his thing, or I don't know.
Right. Yeah, no, I think, though, that I think the part you just said about it probably wouldn't have changed much in terms of the actual performance you gave is absolutely true, because the job as the actor is to be the character, not your meta-realized self in the context of this franchise you're in, right? But it may have done something else for you in terms of a sense of dignity and esteem and that sort of a thing. And of course, what you do in your work is one thing, and the fundamentals of your life outside of that are really what you're living with, and But yeah, and maybe it would have given you a different kind of motivation, or I don't know. But
I think maybe we would have read the manga and known some more things than we were given in the moment, like season 0. And I mean, specifically with Yu-Gi-Oh, I know you've talked about wanting to maybe if the option, talk about that a little bit more. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Oh yeah. So what you're getting at is about a little over a year ago, I put up about a minute of a scene in the original manga where Kaiba swipes a card from Yugi. And, of course, I'm reading the Yugi dialogue, and Eric's doing the Kaiba dialogue. And there's very little sound design. There's very little music actually happening. And I'm taking the images and going from left to right, which is the way that you read a manga. Mm-hmm. And I wanted it to feel as much like reading a manga as possible, with just the characters and voices that you recognize with those characters being narrated, if you will.
Right.
And yeah, it got a good response. And this is shortly after Takahashi had so tragically passed away, so unexpectedly and so heroically. Mm-hmm. And so for Eric and I, it's more of a consideration of what a great way to honor his work.
Yeah.
And what the manga is different than the show that it became, and yet there's still enough similarity. I think that anybody who likes the animated series is going to love, experiencing the manga in that way. And we would want to keep the character names true to the manga as on the page. So, for instance, Joey wouldn't be Joey; it'd be Joyuchi. If I'm mispronouncing that, my apologies. It's spelled like that,
right.
as far as I read it. But so anyway, but to be faithful to the original. And Eric and I we're not like wanting to make money off of it. Like you
just want to make it so it exists.
Exactly. And in the most tasteful way possible. And because we also hear from people at conventions, they ask, so is there going to be anything else? And you can tell that you're hoping that, you can say honestly, there's this thing coming, and there's not that I know of. But I wouldn't know anything anyway. The actors are the least important part of the process. Yeah.
Although I felt like Dark Side of Dimensions ended on a cliffhanger.
I understand it. There was an ambiguity there. And I actually came up with a premise as to what might happen next.
Really?
Really, I did.
Okay.
I put it on my socials. But
I love that you've become active on social media. Like within the last 2 years, is it? Or
I think it's almost 2 years, or maybe it's 2.5 years, a year and a half. Wait, it was
inspired
last Christmas it was 6 months, so it's been a year and a half.
Okay, what inspired you to suddenly? Because I remember when we were doing the graphic novel that you were working on, I said, I said, Dan, like, how do I tag you on social media? And you were like, I don't do any of that. So what was the catalyst?
I crawled out from under my rock.
That's what I love it.
What is this thing you call electricity? So, Andromeda Productions is the production company that Eric and I have, and the graphic novel, what you're referring to, what we often refer to as an illustrated audio drama, which is really just a fancy way of saying pictures with narration and music and sound design and that sort of thing. It's sort of like, for people who want to know what an animatic is, it sort of feels more like that. Anyway, we're trying to simulate the experience of reading a black and white comic book, but you have all the sound. And anyway, so that
Dan's beautiful artwork.
That's so kind of you to say.
Yes,
that's so kind of you to say. I actually re-listened to the performances very often when I'm flying to a convention. And you guys did such wonderful work, and I just really.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we can
I'm
get
excited when it's done.
I know. We can talk about that later, but I wanted to get to the why the social media thing, and that was why. It was because it was just sort of like, well, if you're producing anything nowadays, there's this expectation you're a fool if you don't have some sort of media presence, and in that social media platform. So. That's the why.
Well, it makes me happy to see you there.
Oh, I mean, you're great to follow, and it is fun to play along. And I had heard such horrible things about Twitter and whatever we call it now.
I call it Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just don't do any of that on my thread. And I don't,
no.
And there hasn't been anybody.
If you stay positive, it tends to stay positive with you. Yeah. I believe.
Yeah, that's been my experience. And I've had to do very little editing people out of the comments.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know it's a 4Kids podcast. We should talk about.
Oh yeah, we're right. The 4Kids thing.
Wait, so did you ever direct at 4Kids, or am I misremembering?
No, I got close. But so what happened? What happened was, there was a show. With the series Ultraman Tiga. This is 4Kids first attempt at doing a live action dub, and I went through the sort of audition process and working with the producer and that sort of a thing, and I hadn't directed a voiceover dub, but I had directed a little like play once, and anyway, I felt comfortable talking to actors and feeling like I could help them get to a performance. But due to let's see, how diplomatic should I be? The producer's newness to his job was to me, and I had like basically a week of actually saying, okay, we're this is your trial week, and we're gonna try to get this much material recorded and what have you. And I got frustrated with his approach to getting it done because. And it was accurate, although this was not a great tension. I understood how to get the stuff recorded in the scheduled time frame that I was supposed to execute in, and there were alterations to the script and using session time in a way that wasn't going to hit that target that I knew was going to complicate things.
Yeah. And
so basically, my frustration with that was evident. And the producer could say, well, and you still didn't get done what I told you to get done. So it was not a good fit, as they say. And I'm not. While it was very aggravating to me at the time and disappointing, it was for the best.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that you were a great director. I feel like we worked on something at Central Park Media that you directed.
I might have directed
that up. Okay.
Or was it at NYAV Post?
Oh, NYAV Post. Yes.
Right,
and I remember there was some scene and you conducting it like a conductor. I don't remember what it was, but I remember seeing you from inside the booth, and it was like it was some kinds of reactions and you were conducting it. And I remember that making sense to me, though. Like it worked for whatever nonsense we were doing.
Right.
But also, I'm glad you talked about the directing thing, and it was a first-time job for so many people at that company, and it's astounding that things ever got done to me. Because the deadlines were crazy pants.
Sure,
there were so many. When you think about how old even the adults in the rooms were, they were not very old.
Right.
All the voice directors, it was their first time voice directing. I can't think of anyone who really had done it before they got there.
Eric.
I mean, maybe Eric a little, but
in commercials.
Field.
Yeah.
And dubbing's its own beast.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I think then this speaks, like Eric is a good example of this. If you know what you're doing behind the mic and you have an ability to communicate to other people fairly effectively, that's who you want to be directing that specific work, right? And I know what you mean. And some of the first-time directors did a great job, and some of them, let's say, did less than that.
Yeah. Very fair.
Another thing, another thing that I notice, and this is true in every field of voiceover stuff lately, that they've just removed the director entirely as much as possible, whenever possible. And that's a real misunderstanding of what a director does and the value.
It's a money-saving tactic.
And it's true they're saving money, but they're losing something else. And, And a lot of people mistakenly think, well, I know what I want the scene to sound like, so therefore I have the capacity to get that performance out of an actor, and that's not true. Everybody knows what it should sound like, but there's a whole language and rhythm and way of working with people, and how to optimize your time. You know, you might be working with the same talent multiple days in a row, but they're never exactly in the same place each of those days, and you got to be sensitive to that.
Well, and 90% of the voice directors at 4Kids were also actors.
Exactly.
And they made the best, in my mind.
I agree. Darren Dunstan, among others.
Andrew,
Tony,
all of those guys.
Andrew,
Chris Colley, all of those guys. They had acting backgrounds.
Right. They understood what the work was.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm sorry. I digressed a bit. Okay, so did you do any stuff on Pokemon before Yu-Gi-Oh? You did a little bit, right? You did.
Yeah, I was Entei in the third movie, which was, while it wasn't, the character didn't have the most lines, it was, it was the titular character. And I think I had done, I'm not sure, and other people will know better than me, but I think I had done some, like antagonist of the week on Pokemon, I think.
It's hard to know the order of things there.
Yeah, and also I might be blurring understanding what that show was because colleagues were doing it with my actual direct experience. But I mean, it was if I didn't do the actual series before the third movie, stuff like that was happening soon after that. So I can't imagine it's relevant.
Right, and that walks me into one of the fan questions from Paper Splash, and they want to know. Do you remember voicing any other creatures aside from Entei, Mewtwo, and Trico?
Oh, Grovyle is another one. And there's got to be more than that because you know how it was. It was, you're there for one character and they're like, hey, whoa, we have these 30 Pokemon cues we didn't, schedule anyone else in for.
You have a mouth. Yeah.
Right. Can you do that with your mouth?
Oh, my God.
Sure.
Oh, those days. So by the time you auditioned for Yu-Gi-Oh!, we'll get back to, so you knew that this was probably going to be somewhat a big deal. Did you know?
Maybe.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knew? Were you excited when you found out you were doing it? Like, how was it?
It certainly had the potential to be a good deal. Yes, I was. I mean, I understood that I wasn't the first choice, and so you. Well, I guess I say you when I actually, of course, I mean me. But I think anyone would then, want to know, okay, what can I do to make it more what you want it to be?
Right. If there's an insecurity with that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, yes, I guess some insecurity, but for me it was more like, I want to make this right. Like, there's a very traditional way of looking at performing where you're providing a service, right? You're serving the story, you're serving the character, you're serving the audience, you're serving the director. It's like, my acting is not about me. It's about this thing that we're all supposed to be participating in. Right.
I consider myself a cog in the whole thing.
Exactly.
And people are like, don't sell yourself short. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
That's not right. That's not a lowest self-esteem statement. It's just purely the way that you approach the function of the job you're doing.
Well, it's also a way for me to look at it as teamwork. I love that about it.
Me too.
Because especially when we're working alone.
Right.
Thinking about the bigger picture is what kind of makes me feel like it's a
for sure
collaborative.
For sure.
So did you also know you were going to voice other roles on that show when you started playing? Like, what did you know going in?
Well, for Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah.
I think it was a smart choice to not have me do too much on that show other than, because I was already playing two characters.
Right.
Right.
So you knew that right away, obviously.
That was part of the audition process. Yeah. And I think it's worth recognizing that, or just so that people out there know that I'm aware that what I was asked to do is very different than what appears in the original Japanese.
Yes. Did you know it then, or did you find that out later, like I did?
No, I knew because they play the original Japanese clip, in the audition. So
in the audition, yes.
So I knew that Yami's voice is very close to Yugi's voice. It's almost really more of an attitude change than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, they wanted me to make it more like that Clark Kent Superman thing, or and for people who just grew up on with that's the version presented to them, they just seem to accept it. And maybe it's because the Pharaoh's an ancient spirit, or that sense of regality, and whatever explains that sort of heightened, slightly heightened standard American I'm doing for the Pharaoh.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, that's what I was going to... Yeah, okay. So then, did any of those hurt your voice? Somebody asked that question.
No.
Okay. How lucky for you. Some of us did dumb things.
Well, but you have to do so much of the scratchy boy stuff, and that's going to... Right?
Big mistake. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you bounced back. You sound wonderful.
Thanks. But Jonathan Todd Ross and I talked about it, that those voices that we did there kind of sidelined our musical theater work. Because,
I didn't know that. Oh my God.
We both kind of stopped doing it for a while because this took such a strain on our
Right. You
voices.
were shredding.
Yeah, we were. Because it does say, someone at Sailor Corgi said that you did a lot of yelling as Yami Yugi, but there's a proper way to do that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And if you're using your voice, and Yami's voice is obviously not exactly my voice, but it's in a range where I'm not stressing it. Right.
Right.
It's much harder to do yelling as Yugi.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, because I'm already maximizing the upper range, so I don't have more ceiling to go to be expressive. And people often, when they emphasize, they often, at least in the English language, the form of English we're used to hearing, you emphasize by raising your pitch on certain things, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was, but with the running gag with when doing Yugi's voices, this was something I would joke about in the booth. Is I have removable testicles. So that's how. Right.
Wait, is that not true?
Well, what I realized just recently is all testicles are removable. It's being able to put them back. That's the trick. Yeah.
Velcro, I think, is
Velcro. Great. I wish I had known.
Shark Tank. That's a Shark Tank idea. Speaking of Yu-Gi-Oh, Matt Cartelli. So we'll do some of our Patreon questions first because they get priority. Matt Cartelli wanted to know, because you did work with so many directors on Yu-Gi-Oh, Eric Stewart, Chris Collet, Darren Dunstan, and Julie Rath, were there major similarities or differences between their directing styles?
You're working with people who are in that exact lineup. Those are people who all like each other, respect each other. We can all hang out together and have a good time, but of course they're different people.
Yeah.
And so Eric's way of directing is very different than Darren's or Chris's or Julie's, and they each have their own thing, And that's another fun part about acting and collaborating with people creatively is figuring out, okay, how do I dance with this person? Because you always got to make the dance happen.
I would guess that Eric's music background played a part in the way. I'm trying to remember. I wish I remembered more of how they directed, but we're old and I've forgotten.
So for Eric, for me, it was he had a tremendous amount of responsibility and pressure.
Yeah.
And so his sessions, at least in the first season of the show, I felt his need to get it done right as fast as possible and as good as possible in that time. Working with Chris, so there was a let's go to it. I don't mean that in a bad way.
Right. Pace. There was a pace.
There was a pace to it, and he was very precise about what he wanted.
Yeah.
And Darren's much more of a laid back energy. Darren also, I think, has this is also not, therefore he's better and everyone else sucks, but Darren has the language of theater direction in his back pocket. And that really helps somebody like me because I have that same background.
You have shortcuts in the words you use to tell each other things.
Exactly.
Yep.
And also like that having an ability to verbalize what you want from a performance can be helpful in ways that just saying, can you make it funnier? Doesn't, Right. It's like people who don't have an experience directing are very often they're going from the result and they don't know how to tell you how to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
Like Darren would say something like, imagine you're about to tell me the funniest joke you've ever heard. Yeah.
Exactly.
They lead you into it without giving you a line reading.
Right.
and they get you right there.
Right.
I would be a terrible director.
You think so?
Yeah, like I love, because I also love a line read. Do you get offended by when someone? Let me explain to the audience. A line reading is when when you're doing a line in a script and maybe you're not getting it the way the director wants, and they read it for you. So I get why that's offensive, but sometimes I'm like, you have something in your head, and I am not in your head.
Exactly, and I'm not offended at all by line reads. Nor do I feel like a line read deprives me of my chance to be creative with it.
Agreed.
You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like you mentioned musical theater earlier. You got to hit the same notes in the same rhythm, right? Yeah. But because it's going through you, it is your own. And, you know, and also you're not excused from committing to those moments.
Right.
Just because you know how they quote unquote sound.
Totally. And you have to trust that the director knows the bigger picture. For sure. Hopefully. And in that particular environment, just so your audience understands, the actors aren't working off of each other. The director is the through line. So you really you want to be able to ideally put your faith in that director because they're the only one who's hearing it all before the first audience hears it all and before any actor hears it all. Okay, we will definitely get back to Yu-Gi-Oh, but I want to make sure we don't keep you forever, and I want to go into some of the later stuff you worked on, because you worked on, like, Blue Baron asks, what was it like working on stuff that wasn't anime? Pat and Stan, Incredible Crash Test Dummies, Go-Go Riki, Viva Piñata, Winx Club. Like, we have not gotten into those shows as much on here. Do you remember them well? I don't want to, like, scare you.
Yeah, so... It's lovely to do all those kinds of things, especially the prelay shows where you really get to define those beats in those moments. I mean, dubbing has its own fun. It's almost like a game. How do I fit myself into that? It's a
puzzle. Yeah.
Right. And still make it alive. But yeah, I mean, Hudson Horstachio, I think I should still be writing checks to Kelsey Grammer. Because I totally stole Kelsey Grammer.
So it's Frasier is the horse. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, and it's not that Hudson doesn't like his friends. He just likes himself more. So he's that kind of egotist. The Crash Dummies.
Oh, sorry. Go on. Go.
Oh, well, the Crash Dummies was fun. Sky, that's another one where I feel like, and this, I'll give you some examples, but Sky was basically Yugi's voice, but or very close to it, but just sort of a different character in his own right, obviously. But I get a little self-conscious about being cast to use the same voice, frequently. And if you were to put Mewtwo, and I was not the original Mewtwo, but if you put Mewtwo and Entei and the Pharaoh in the same conversation, it's gonna sound a lot like the same person talking.
Yes.
But again, it's just like I'm only doing what I'm being asked. So.
Right. I'm one person.
Well, there's that. There's a limit. There's a toward
We're not
the
all
end.
Mark Thompson.
Well, he's extraordinary. So is Wayne Grayson. But what I get a little frustrated at 4Kids with was especially towards the end, right? After they'd had me do those characters I just named. But they would say, okay, so Dan, here's a role. We want you. We want it to sound masculine, sort of like baritone, maybe also a little bit refined, but don't sound like the Pharaoh. I'm like, what? Am I going to do it with a limp? What am I? Give me a mouse. Give me a mouse who's neurotic and has and is French.
Right.
Which was, doing Pat and Stan. That was so much fun. Because I got to be very different than I had been, in other shows at that time, which was just this, very flamboyant and very effeminate hippo.
Naturally.
And I don't know, maybe that would get canceled nowadays because I'm not naturally effeminate.
You wouldn't be playing it, I guess, is what it would be. I
guess,
today.
But there's not all effeminate men are gay, so I don't know if we're.
But what a fun thing to stretch your ability! Like I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was the most fun.
The absurdity of that show was just a delight.
Well, and the fun of going to 4Kids, like sometimes we didn't audition for the roles we got, and you never knew what was going to happen that day. So if I got in there and they were like, okay, you're playing another young boy, I'd be like, okay, another boy voice. But when it was all of a sudden something different, I was like, oh, good. They think I can play a sexy lady or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. You brought up Mewtwo and that you weren't the original. And Brock from Patreon wanted to know if you, and maybe you don't know the answer, why the voice got replaced.
No, I don't know. But I did meet Jay Getty this past summer, and great guy. This was an appearance in London. And he was delightful. But I didn't ask him that.
I believe that he didn't live in New York is one of my guesses. I think he flew in when he did it at some point. And we all know that 4Kids preferred people to be close by.
Sure.
So I'm going to go with that as
why not? But I thought he was fantastic in that role, and I was honored to assume the mantle.
And I hate to ask you this, but Brock from Patreon also wanted you to say the word subscribe in Mewtwo's voice. And you do not have to do that.
It's fine. So you're going to have have it actually sound like Mewtwo thoroughly. It needs a little reverb. So, and who wants me to do this?
This someone from Patreon named Brock.
Okay.
Brock from Patreon. It is what you do with the gift of your subscription that defines who you are. So, subscribe.
That was awesome. Okay, that brings me to another, and I'm sorry, Steve, I am just on fire here, so please just tell me.
Sorry, I was just thinking of like when Viva Piñata got brought up. It's a show I'm not familiar with. I didn't play the game either, but the one thing I'll always remember is the commercial for the video game.
That commercial is so funny.
It is. So I still think of that line. That was acting, children.
That was acting, children. You're right.
Great line. That has stuck with me.
So this might be a slightly interesting story, and you can, if it's not out, edit it out if it's not. But so I show up to do the commercial, right? And I'm just assuming that I'm doing, Hudson Horstachio because he's in the commercial, and I've been playing this character in, a number of episodes, right? So I'm, doing all my Hudson Horstachio things and just making sure I can go to all the parts of the voice that I feel I, might need. I don't know what they're going to do with this commercial copy. And so the commercial itself is completely flat delivery up until the very, very end. Almost like I'm Jedi mind tricking these kids to release me as a piñata. And so it's not at all like anything I had been doing as the character Hudson Horstachio, but it was also something I felt very comfortable. I mean, they did a really good job of, putting me in the right headset. Mm-hmm. So that was very funny to do that. But
did you get to do a lot of I would assume with Yugi you did a ton of promos, right? Which
was great, and that was coinciding around the time that I was getting to know Michael, who I later married, and she would come to a session with me, and I felt so cool. Because doing those promo sessions, and you make, if you do enough tags or whatever, you make your money for the week or two, in 45 minutes. Right. And it makes me feel very cool in front of this hot chick who's decided to spend some time with me. I was just going to say,
Jay's talking about his wife, and I was so intimidated by Michael because she was maybe the coolest person I'd ever met. She was like badass. There was something but the sweetest, kindest.
Very sweet.
And so it was disarming because she was so cool. And I was intimidated, but I was like, oh, but she's so nice. Like, sometimes hot girls like that you want to hate because they're so, like, perfect. And I was like, oh, I can't hate her. She's awesome.
Yeah. And she's also, she was an authentic geek,
she was cool.
Yeah. And she also, she got into this voiceover stuff, and she was in Speed Racer, and she did some audiobooks and was... I mean, she was a talent in her own right, but a singer-songwriter is, I think, how she, that was her first definition.
And that's how I perceived her, and that, to me, was what was so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, well, talent's an aphrodisiac, and she was
I call it talent traction.
Oh, talent traction, nice. When I first met her going to Wayne's birthday party, and Wayne was dating Michael's younger sister. So I show up at the party, and it's at Cedar Tavern, which is not there anymore, but that place near Union, just down from Union Square. And anyway, so I come in and I see Wayne there, and this lovely young woman, Michael's younger sister standing next to him, like, oh, well, he's done really well for himself. Then I look down the table, and there's this just like drop-dead gorgeous blonde. And I'm like, she's way out of my league. I'm not even going to try to talk to her. Make a fool out of myself. But later in the night, Michael came up to me and said, are you the voice of Yu-Gi-Oh? And I'm like, yeah. Well, she had been watching the show her girlfriend's boyfriend was in.
Right.
So, and it went on from there.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. But I was going to say, though, when I saw her perform her set live, I mean, it was just like, wow.
Yeah.
Very, very
She's the real deal. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah.
Okay. So you're doing these promo sessions.
Oh, yeah.
Bringing your hot girlfriend around.
Those were fun times.
Do any of like the funny singing promos?
Yeah.
Which one did you...
There was something, there was the national anthem.
Yes.
Right?
Classic.
Also, did I do Respect as Pat from Pat and Stan?
Oh, gosh. If anyone knows the answer, I'll Google it after, but if any listeners
I did
can
some
find
singing
that,
as Stan,
that's
I
hilarious.
Believe. Yeah.
That's very funny.
Yeah. And if anybody should sing a song best made known by an extremely talented black woman, it's me.
It's you.
I mean, like, I'm the next thing that comes to mind.
Obvi.
Right.
So, C. Dobbins wants to thank you for Professor Pickle.
Oh, Professor
Can
Pickle.
you explain that? It sounds dirty, but what are we talking about here?
Your most famous Sonic character. Yeah.
I think, it was Professor Pickle, then Knuckles.
Yes, that's the order.
Yeah.
So, you're welcome. Just say you're welcome.
Yeah. I'm glad you like my pickle. Is that the wrong thing to say?
It's a perfect thing to say. Some of these, like, questions we got from the audience just sound like flirting compliments.
Oh, I would hate to be flirted with.
Yeah, like this one just says, playing hero type men like Yugi and Prince Sky. This is from @L'Oreal Harris 1. Playing hero type like Yugi and Prince Sky. How do you do it?
Just rewind the episode and then start over.
Dan, how do you do it?
How do you do that?
And then there was one that said, I just like these because I want you to hear this. How does it feel to have a nice, deep voice? You sound like you could voice Batman or Darth Vader. That was from My Heroes Animania. So just some compliments for you.
I appreciate that. Playing, to take all the fun out of this conversation, playing heroes is not always fun or easy, even though, and partly it's because they're so straightforward. A lot of actors will tell you playing villains, that's much more fun. And also heroes tend to be reactive and villains, tend to be proactive. But I mean, that was a very complimentary thing. And I think I am thought of for those roles just simply because there's something about the way my voice sounds that people think it feels right for that sort of thing. I also really love playing villains. I was surprised to learn that Mephiles, which is a villain from Sonic, I did that character once for a video game. But I learned from making appearances that people really like that. I was just like, yeah, great. But
it's a nice surprise when that happens.
Well, as to the other comment about the deep voice, I really don't have that deep of a voice, but I appreciate
you
again
can do it. Yeah,
I can turn it on a bit. I'm certainly no Darth Vader, but Batman, yeah, I could probably do a decent version of Batman.
Totally deep Batman.
Yeah.
I remember my younger days. I remember talking with some fans, and we thought that there was a certain amount of, in particular, anime voice actors that felt like they were cut from the same cloth that, I don't know, grew from the deep voice tree. I remember you were one of them. I'm not gonna throw other people on there, but I remember Dan Green's one of those it's like one of those guys who could bring it. I'm curious though, if there's any characters that come to mind for you, because people think you have these great booming heroic voices. Are there any characters you remember playing where it's wow, this was something really different that I got to do and had a lot of fun, but maybe
sure. Well, I mentioned Pat from Pat and Stan, and he would express himself like this. So that was a lot of fun, and but something as simple as Trico, and playing a Pokemon is playing intention, on the same syllables over and over, right? But yeah, it was really fun to be able to go to a completely different part of myself and say things like,
Trick or treat, trick or treat.
Oh,
Right?
see, that's that like Glomer voice that
Sure.
I can't do at all. I'm so envious. Can you Donald Duck too?
Not well. No, I don't have enough. I don't. I can't enunciate him very well.
Okay, you
But,
can find it, and you can find the placement.
Yeah, I'm still trying to do like a sidecar of air out my cheek, but yeah, that's not very good.
Oh, I'm so envious of people who can do that. This is a question that I get asked all the time.
Okay.
That at Spock tackles, I can't read it, wants to know if you've had any interaction with little Kuribo, and what you think of all of that. Do you have an opinion on that? I don't. I'm not offended by anything really. So
Me either.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of interaction with little Kuribo, although we were talking about social media earlier, and I did have a little. I did send him a couple of things. Amicable, totally amicable.
Yeah.
I expressed some sympathies to him. His father passed away not too long ago, and sometimes on Twitter I'll put up a video and I'll be doing, I'll be talking about something. Sometimes I'll be drawing. And it'll be like a time lapse, and I'll talk over that. And I think somebody said, "Oh, your voice would be great for ASMR." And then I'm like, "Oh."
Yeah.
So, and like when you're doing social media, you're like, "Well, what's something fun to do on social media, not just like another picture of my coffee?" And no offense to you coffee picture takers out there.
Have at it.
But and so I asked, "Oh, what if I were to do some ASMR? What would you want me to do?" And one of the comments was from Little Kuribo, and it was like saying encouraging things after I've lost a duel. So not the next day, but like within a month or so, I did do that. I had a little pop of well, I guess it was Yugi, but I was doing the voice of Yami Yugi. Forgive me, but I just assume that's the voice people want to hear. So it was like this pop was saying these encouraging things to.
The big thing on the Abridged series is that they always tell Mokuba to shut up. So I've met Martin in person, and we have a video of me telling him to shut up. So that was very satisfying for me.
Right. There's the only tension part of it is related to Konami's.
Yes.
The rights infringement, and I'm not going to get into any of that.
That's not our place. Yeah, that's
not my business,
us.
really.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't want to offend Konami, so I don't. When fans ask me to sign stuff, Little Kuribo quotes, I won't do that.
Right? No,
that's
makes
not
sense.
because I hate Martin. That's
Listen, parody. I'm a fan of parody in all forms. So
right.
But I am also a fan of the law. So I get it.
Right.
We're back on the thank you for bringing that up. It was nice. We're back on the Yu-Gi-Oh tangent, and I guess I might as well ask this while I can.
Go for it.
Geek out.
It's about the uncut dub, and now me in particular, we've asked a lot of people about it on the show so far because there's very little information out there about it. And there still is not much information.
Well, the actors don't remember recording it.
I'm curious if you remember recording.
Oh, I do. I mean, I don't remember scintillating, amazing moments. I mean, it was different. It wasn't hugely different. But I remember thinking, oh, they're finally doing what fans have been asking for. And of course, as somebody who's looking to keep working, it was nice to think, oh, well, maybe this will add to some more. Literally just ease in paying rent.
Yeah.
But it was also interesting to me to do something that was less simplified for a very specific understanding of what children should be watching in the United States. And I don't say that with disrespect either, but a lot of fans give 4Kids flack for following laws and rules that weren't their own making. Standards and practices is a thing that exists far outside of 4Kids. So that's why all that stuff got changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But I've talked about. I had to tell Tara what it was because Tara doesn't remember.
I don't remember. Recording it.
I'd be into it though, for sure.
But you distinct. I mean, I guess because Mokuba probably had a handful of lines, and of course,
yeah, you said a lot more than I did. Yeah,
probably.
Do you distinctly remember coming in and it was a session oh, this is for an uncut dub, or was it kind of
there was a secret passage?
Yes.
No, it was. I mean, I remember the session, but there was otherwise nothing extraordinary about it.
Yeah.
So
and
I thought it was a cool idea. I'm pro uncut, and season 0, right? Yeah.
But I can only assume like there wasn't like a big, all hands on deck meeting. It's like, hey, everybody, we're not doing the Yu-Gi-Oh! Uncut dub anymore.
Oh no!
I guess it's just kind of. Hey,
No,
what
it's just that
happened
you
to
don't. It's just that you don't get that next call.
Yeah.
Right.
It just goes
And
away. Yeah.
It just
Right.
goes away, and maybe while you're at 4Kids recording for something else, you'll hear through the grapevine, or maybe a producer will tell you what's up.
Maybe,
so.
or maybe like with the in 4Kids style, someone else just took your role. Like, you don't know.
Interesting. You probably more than anybody probably gets a lot of questions about that, and I'm like, no, it's good to get the word out. That's what this podcast is about.
No,
so
I
just wanted to
appreciate
make
that,
sure.
and I find it charming, and I also hope I'm not disappointing the fans out there who assume that because we worked on a show in a role that we therefore know everything about not only what happened at the time, but also everything related to the franchise afterward. I don't listen back to my.
I was gonna say, no one's asking you to referee a game of Yu-Gi-Oh.
My God, they shouldn't. No.
Now I want to. This podcast has been really interesting because we interviewed somebody who you and I probably never interacted with, named Waldo Cabrera, because he was in the Uptown office. Now, he
You're
was
right.
the one whose idea it was in the home video department to make those uncut dubs.
Oh, really? And that's why we've never heard from him again.
Right, exactly. No, he's Emmy award winning, but he grew up. He went to art school in New York. He was a real diehard fan of all this stuff, and it was really cool to hear that there was someone in the office representing that demographic.
Yeah,
and being disappointed that sales weren't good enough to sustain making the whole series that way.
Right.
So we're getting questions answered.
Well, and that's it. It's about the numbers. It's, as that old saying goes, it's show business, not show art.
Not show fun.
Right.
And
well, yeah.
You dropped like season 0, which is like the fan term for the Toei series a bunch of times.
Right.
If people listening to this don't know, no, it's fine. I knew exactly what you're saying. But for people that don't know, the original anime license for Yu-Gi-Oh was handed to Toei Animation around like mid 90s or so, and they produced like a series of television that was kind of more like the manga is, but now it's kind of. It's not lost media, but it's not really going to be, you're never going to get like the Blu-ray collection of it. And I'm sure you're probably asked this like a million times about dubbing that.
Yeah.
Would love to see it, but.
Right. But one of those, I don't have the permissions. I don't have the licenses or rights. And
But you did mention, and I had forgotten this till you brought it up again, but, you and Eric doing the voice work for some of the manga. And I just want to say, like, I really appreciate that because I was
good.
a fan.
You would like that.
Oh, yeah. When I saw that, I was like, this is cool because I'm
you saw the thing on the social media. Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank you because it's a huge fan
I appreciate
of the
that.
manga.
I'm a huge comic book fan.
Yeah,
and I haven't read all the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, but I've read some of it, and so I have a real affection for just what's on the page. Also, some of my favorite work as a director, and actually, I was more of just a total audio producer. I did a number of motion comics for Marvel, like 13 years ago or whatever. But there was a X-Men thing and an Iron Man thing and a Loki Thor thing. That was so much fun to do, and I got to help with the casting process, and I directed the actors, but I also helped with the sound design. And I didn't make the music, but I was coordinating with the I was the name of composer. That's what they call them. We would do what they call spotting sessions, where we would watch over the video, and the composer doesn't have the time to understand what all the story's about. So again, this is the relevance of a director. They're making the story relatable to everybody who's participating in creating it, and being that through line that threads it all together. That was some of the most fun I did. But again, that comes out of a love for comics and also Crossing the Gods, which is the project that Tara was referring to as a graphic novel, which is a very fair way to think of it, is very much in that line. It's anyway. There's you can do it. You can achieve so much with the simplicity of an image and sound.
Yeah.
Sound itself is so powerful. It's
I should also say Steve is a professional storyboard artist, so you're speaking
Oh, well, so you know
his
exactly
language.
what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what an animatic is?
Oh yeah, when you said animatic before, I'm like, it just went over my head, and I'm like, I don't have to explain that term. But no, I know. I really appreciate you bringing up the Marvel thing. While I'm not familiar with those motion comics, I've seen those credits on a lot of New York voice actors, 4Kids actors, often on like their pages, IMDb's, whatever, and always found that interesting. But hearing that you played like a huge part in that, I don't know if that's listed. I don't know if that's listed anywhere, but just hearing that story, I really appreciate you sharing that. And
that medium didn't go anywhere. Yeah, that medium didn't go anywhere anyway. But it was fun work to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same group that kind of does a lot of audiobook work in New York. Yeah.
Sure.
Do you enjoy that kind of work?
Do I enjoy audiobook work?
Yeah. I know that like Mark and I, we've taught, and Veronica, a lot of us do a lot of that work. Jonathan, I think it's exhausting work. So I'm curious how you feel about doing that work.
Yeah, I feel the same. And I think a lot of people might be surprised that audiobook work is as challenging as it is, because, you're just reading words off of a page, of course.
Alone. Yeah.
Alone.
No director.
No director. And there's escalations of challenge. And so, the basic one is that you're communicating the story. And again, we were talking about serving the story and the author, and right. So I want to make sure I'm doing the right genre for the book. No two books are exactly the same. No two shows are exactly the same. Each thing has its slightly specific reality, and so you want to make sure you're at least in the right neighborhood with that. And then there's like how much character variation for the voices, in terms of how they sound. With an audiobook, my approach is I'm not trying to convince the audience that somebody else has stepped behind the microphone. I'm trying to give a voice interpretation that's fitting to the character and recognizable enough so that the audience can distinguish who's talking without needing to rely on,
I always say I suggest the voice.
Well, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah. And then there's, accents and terminology. And so The Gray Man is a series I've been narrating for over a decade. And those stories take place across the world. And Mark Rainey, who writes it, is very well researched. And there's military terminology. There's languages from across the world, and there's characters. In your accents for them have to be at least plausible enough that they're not annoying. Right?
Yeah.
So that's all adds to the challenge. But I don't love doing audiobooks, but I'm very glad to have the work.
Yes,
and I think that audiobooks has been a wonderful practice in terms. I'm much more versatile now with my voice than I was 20 years ago. And also there's just so much. It's nice to be able to say, oh, well, if you like my work and you like the way that I sound, here's a 20-hour book. Right. That's like a whole season of Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, if you're not sick of me after that, we can be friends. Yeah.
But you don't. How do you feel about you said it stresses you out, and I completely. Or you said something like that.
It's the solitary work of it
element,
like I've been in my booth alone all day and doing audiobooks, and
do you direct yourself way more than when you're doing it at a studio?
I don't. I've learned to let go, and you can't, like we said before, you can't be precious with every moment in a book.
Yeah.
With a 10-hour project, you have to learn to trust your instincts more.
Right.
But there's times when all of a sudden I'll be doing a line 10 times. I'm like, okay, no, move on. This is ridiculous. And I've gotten better at stopping myself from overanalyzing.
Yeah, I need to do more of that. You
really overdirect yourself?
I fall into that, and I don't even think that I necessarily get to a better result, But so
something that came up in a lot of the questions that we got, and because I know you teach voiceover.
Yeah, I've taught for over 15 years.
I want to talk about like what you teach, what you think, what you specialize in. What I give terrible advice to up and coming actors. Because I don't know how to teach. Like, so coming from you, I would listen more than from me. So what is it that like you tell them what is it people can do if they want to study with you.
Right. So before getting into specifically the kinds of things that I teach them, I think it's more important to understand the focus of what I'm trying to do when I'm working with people is to teach them wrong, so they aren't competition. I'm just
That's
kidding.
a great idea. I think I said this time, like teach everyone to read it with a lisp. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
People say it's out of fashion. Don't listen to that. Don't think like the pack. So I really have enjoyed the process of teaching, again, because it keeps you sharp. It's good practice, you know. And there's that old saying, you know, those who can't do teach, that's such bullshit. Can you swear on the show?
Yeah, you can say whatever the fuck you want. Yeah.
Because I just did.
Oh, no.
Which also helped me with my work. But so there's the areas of voice work which are commercial narration, which essentially is everything that's not exactly a commercial. And then there's the animation stuff. And, you know, people say, oh, there's a big distinction between animation and gaming. That's bullshit. Don't listen to that either. Don't make a gaming demo and an animation demo. There's really, I don't think that I would not recommend that you have little.
I had to.
You may disagree, but I don't feel that is, if you're tight on money, necessarily the best investment.
I'll tell you what I did, which is so funny.
I could be completely wrong.
Used some animation stuff in my gaming demo, and no one would ever know because it's just about what they think a gaming demo is and what they think an animation demo is.
That's smart, but in a sense, you're kind of proving my point because you could interchange.
Yes, I am.
That material was interchangeable. Yeah. So anyway, anybody would tell you that the acting part of voice acting is the most important part. It doesn't really matter how you sound if you can't make a moment work.
Right.
And there's a lot of very successful voiceover actors in the field of animation who do very little to change their voice from character to character, and that's great.
Yeah.
That's fine. You know, you don't see Clancy Brown switching it up a lot, but, you know, you cast him in the right roles and he's going to be great.
It's about casting at that point. Yeah.
For sure. And he's a great actor. He's not just a great sound.
Yes.
So, yeah.
He can back it up.
For sure. And I taught with Edge Studio for a long time. I'm no longer teaching there, and I only have a couple students that I'm working with privately. So, because I needed to find a way to, you know, create this work-life balance thing a little bit better.
It's not easy.
It's not easy, and with the convention stuff, which is just such a wonderful thing to be able to be a part of. That allows me more time to do the Andromeda stuff. And, you know, I mean, I've been working on Crossing the Gods since 2017.
Oh, wow.
And we recorded it in like 2018?
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right.
Somewhere in there. And it's just been, you know, this process of what I'm doing exactly with the imagery. And, you know, and then COVID happened and that was very complicated.
Yeah. And you got two kids running around. Yeah, you got other stuff to do.
And I don't want to let all of my career go. And so, I still keep my self available for audiobooks, although I did kind of take a break for several months. But I feel like I've been away for too long, and now I have months of audiobook work to do. And, you know, it's just...
That's how it happens. I sometimes I think my career's over, and then all of a sudden... And I spend like a month being really upset, and then all of a sudden I have more work than I can handle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's hurry up and wait. I don't want to forget to ask you this, though, because on the Yugi thing, I know Eric met Sensei. Did you also meet Sensei? Yeah,
we met. I met him with Eric. I don't know if Eric had met him outside of that, and that was, a real thrill. I didn't have a great sense of. I learned something about the Japanese culture in that process, and the whole behaviors around. Will you meet this person, and how is that done, and what the entourage is now. Sensei Takahashi was completely open and fun and personal, kind, soft-spoken, seemed like a great guy, but the behavior surrounding it was what I would associate with, like, getting cleared to see the president,
Right. That's so fascinating.
Of the United States.
We don't treat our writer I mean, what's funny too is like in Hollywood, the joke is like, the writers are like the lowest on the totem pole. Like they don't get to make final decisions, all that. And then the way they're revered somewhere else is pretty cool.
So cool. Yeah. And we're nowhere without the writers.
Yeah. nowhere. I mean, that's what
some
the writer's
actors can
strike
write,
was,
but
yeah.
some actors can write, but not most of them.
No,
not as well as writers.
Well, and there were so many questions that we got for you about like ad-libbing and stuff like that, and I'm like, we didn't really like it happens so infrequently for me, at least with this with this stuff. Is that for you too?
You mean with the dubbing stuff we're known for?
Yeah, like I don't remember ad-libbing.
Right. So that would happen when you're screwing up a take halfway through, right?
Yes.
Actually, so you remember working with Jimmy Regan?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. So, and Arlen, who directed those sessions,
CPS,
while
this was
sometimes
Central
also
Park Media stuff, yeah.
Right. While also sometimes taking a nap in the session.
All the time. Yes, I won't tell him you said that, yeah.
Well, he has a good sense of humor, right?
Yes.
Anyway, maybe don't tell him. But give my love. Tell him I said hi. Anyway, so, but we were doing Descendants of Darkness, I guess. And I guess I hadn't worked with those guys much, or maybe that was like the first show or whatever, and I was a lead character, so I was seeing a lot of them. And so you know how fun those sessions can be, right?
Yes.
And so we had a good jovial, joking around kind of guy. You know, they're older than us, but not that much older, you know. Anyway, so with Descendants of Darkness, toward the end of the series, when they play you the first take, I would always just ad-lib something. Just because you're marking the you're marking the pacing, right?
So it might be like, I need to eat a sandwich. Yeah, you might just say anything. Yeah.
Right. There was this big climactic scene at the end. And my character's, challenging this huge demonic figure in force and whatever. And so they played the clip, and he's like, there's magic involved, and this climactic moment. And I remember that the first time they showed me the clip, I was like, I validate your parking, or something. Like I don't know why I just did Yugi there, but yeah. But that was I knew what the syllables were, right? I knew how many syllables.
You're counting flaps. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And the scripts we were working off of a lot of the time with the Central Park Media stuff, I challenge you. You were ad-libbing, but you were ad-libbing, you were adapting the dialogue that didn't fit the image. Right.
It wasn't as funny as yours was.
As validate the parking, yes. As a spell to banish a demon.
I swear we'll let you leave, but the last two questions I have, I think you'll enjoy. This is from someone on Instagram named JMS Vegas, and they want to know, who was your favorite engineer you worked with whose name rhymes with Mosif Malik?
I can't imagine why I'm getting this question from a Vegas. But it might be Joe Shalek. Speaking of, ad-libs, he has all of the outtakes.
Which he will not share with us.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
Well, he knows.
There's an engineer that we worked with who still works at Konami, Joe Shalek, so shout out. But he...
great guy.
Yeah, he has some outtakes somewhere. Someone rob his house.
Well, don't do that, because then he'll leverage the outtakes that he has, and he'll force us to pay a ransom. I think that's why he's holding out. It's it's a security plan.
And our final question is from this young upstart named Erica Schroeder, VA.
Oh, that biatch.
Yeah, that biatch. What was your favorite mustache in all the series you've been in?
My favorite mustache?
Yeah, that's what listen, this is what the people clearly want to know.
Let's see. I would.
Erica, what is this question?
I don't remember a ton of my characters having mustaches.
What is Erica referring
she
to?
She might,
Horstachio must have had a mustache, I feel like.
Oh, well, I see.
I don't know.
Cannabis is legal in the state, so maybe Erica's having a little fun.
Maybe.
Just
okay, you know what? We should find a different final question.
Well,
because that was a terrible one.
But to answer that question, yes, please answer it for me.
Yes.
What should
Unless you got a mustache ready to go. I think just because we talked just plenty about the craft today, and
sure.
I think just to end this on a 4Kids note, because I guess that's our speciality here. I don't know if you could just sum up the time period you spent working there, what would that be?
Okay, I will answer that, but for Erica, I will say, let's say that Entei's facial fur is a mustache.
You know what? That's a good answer.
Oh, that's
and
perfect.
Entei was one of my favorite things to do, for sure. It was such a simple fairy tale story that anybody can understand. It was a universal story, right? It happened to be in Pokémon, right? But to answer your question, With the lens of history, the benefit of hindsight, I now see that was one of the most magical times I got to be a part of. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that every part of that was amazing. And that doesn't mean that all of the things that were not amazing had to do with the way 4Kids worked or whatever. I was going through a lot of, I work with depression my entire life. So, I mean, I feel very happy. I feel very stable. I'm not on that sort of like dangerous precipice part of depression, but I know what it is, and, so that was also the time where I met the woman who became, if it hadn't been for Yu-Gi-Oh, I could ask who's my favorite character. That's impossible to say, but I owe the most to Yami and Yugi because without those characters, I never would have met Michael and have the children that I have today. And there was also an excitement at that time. We were in our later 20s, early 30s, and the studio was blossoming with success, and not just doing the dubbing stuff, but the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, that was a solid series, you know? And so it was exciting to be a part of a studio that was very willing to work with, they're very willing to work with you, under certain conditions, right? And also, so the first episode of Yu-Gi-Oh was supposed to air and didn't get aired on its original air date because of the attacks on 9/11.
Yeah.
And I remember going back to the studio like a day or two after that happened, and it just feeling so strange. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
Why am I? It wasn't.
Nothing's important. It felt like this is silly.
In contrast to what had just happened, everything seemed. You were questioning the relevance of everything, but as a performer, you have to get yourself to the performance, or you're letting down everybody. Mm-hmm. And so, in order to get my head in the game, I thought, well, maybe this show will in some way provide some kind of comfort to the kids out there, the audience out there that's watching it in these really scary times, right? Not that I thought that I was going to solve everything. A distraction, exactly. And that helps. But, there's so much more positive to whatever negative, and I have friendships, lifelong friendships. I mean, Tara and I are not super close friends that talk every day, but I consider Tara a good friend, a dear friend, and I would feel horrible if anything happened to you.
Right, we have history.
We have history.
Can pick up where we left off. Like, I feel like there's a closeness that I think all of us feel without having to check in every day or with,
Exactly. Like with family, even.
Yeah.
I don't talk to my sisters every day, but, Yeah. And also the group that we got to know, these people remain some of the people whose talent I respect most. And I've seen other talent, right?
Yes.
So, you're still one of the best actors I've ever worked with.
Shut your mouth, you are. I can't take a compliment. But no, but it's, people joke about, we talk about this a lot, like people joke about how 4Kids just kept using the same people.
Oh, yeah.
Over. And it's partially because we were fast, efficient, decent workers. Yeah. Like, I can't compliment myself, but and listen, it's not the best work I've done in my life. I understand that it's stylized and there's things about it.
Oh, of course.
But you know what? For a cold read, we got that stuff done well and fast and efficiently. Yep. And there's a reason why we like each other, because we also respect each other's level of work and that too, which helps. Right.
It's kind of like a party trick or a puzzle, as you said. And, to be able to give a convincing enough performance in the parameters that you're working in is kind of a trick. And you definitely need skill to do that and talent. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Just patting ourselves on the back left and right here.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I watched something recently, and like a clip from One Piece, and I don't remember what my line was, but I was like, oh, I sound like I'm trying to match the lip flap. Like I could,
I could artificially extenuating certain syllables, and it didn't sound natural. Yeah,
and I was like, God, if I had to take two, I could have nailed it. But again, we were working fast. We were working with young directors. Like, for what it was, I was like, you know what? We got the job done. Like, I'm overanalyzing it. And again, I know, listen, there's plenty of criticism about 4Kids. I'm not negating that, like,
sure,
some shit was terrible. But
sure,
I'm proud of a lot of what we accomplished.
Oh, yes. I'm grateful for it.
Yes, very grateful.
Yeah. And some of those sessions were some of the most fun I've had. You know?
Yeah, we didn't really get to talk. Like, again, I swear we'll let you leave. With Turtles, you ended up in the booth with like your best friends. Was that just amazing for you?
Well, that was certainly fun. And I didn't do a lot on Turtles, but of course, yes, that was fun. What was the fun in sessions for me, I think most was even like the not so great stuff, but like working with Tony and Dan at Sonomat. You're very little supervision, right? And we're just getting
on titles that you guys will never see. Like we're talking about really obscure stuff.
Yeah, and also we would gather, outside of the booth, and that would be fun. So
it was hard to go back in to get work done because we would end up talking so much.
Oh well, there's that too.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it was the camaraderie of it.
Right. And we also have an awareness, we're seeing the show before the audience does. We have an awareness of, what people might find silly about it or whatever. If you've made a joke about the shows, we probably made those jokes as well.
Yeah, we get it.
Right. But we're there to serve as best we can. So, yeah.
Well, you've served us today
very
well.
Thank you.
Dan Green.
Thank you, Tara.
You've said it all.
I talk a lot, but
No, that was really thank you for. I appreciate you talking about Michael. I know that's not always the easiest, and I love hearing. I love talking about it, and I am very appreciative of your time, and I'm really glad you're doing so many conventions so people can tell you all of this in person. So
it's really surprising, and it's such. I receive so many nice comments. Perhaps some of which I deserve, but I can't imagine that I deserve all of them. But no, it's really wonderful, and thank you for having me on. And we got to get you on the Heart of the Cards, and we'll talk about some hero's journey stuff, maybe to keep away from just the standard fare of kind of questions.
And all of the links for your podcast and your social media will be in the show notes when this comes out. So you guys just look below, and thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
I'm so glad you got to meet Dan Green. He is obviously one of my favorites. But now you know him too.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. I was trying to think how can I think of a way to describe Dan that also describes his beautiful locks of hair.
His hair.
He's got an impressive mane, and I think it suits him very well. I mean, I think we talked about it on the show a bunch, and it's weird for me, someone who does not know him, to talk about how he looks now.
Right. And when I come upon pictures of him from years ago, it's a different person. And I want to thank him for being so open and talking about his wife, Michael. When she passed, it was obviously devastating. And I am appreciative of anybody who can speak that openly. And I was not joking when I said she was a badass, and I was intimidated because she was just cool and sweet and great. So thank you to Dan for being so open about that. I think it's anyone who's going through the grieving process, I think it is important to keep their memory alive and keep talking about them.
I really appreciate Dan, speaking so openly about her, and feel like from what the sense I could get, she was a very integral part in not just his life, but I guess his career. I think they just go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And I think it seems like he can't reflect on those times without reflecting about her too. And
and she was one of those spouses, girlfriends, sometimes people bring their partners around your core group of friends, and it's weird because you guys are so tight-knit.
Yeah.
But that was never how you felt around her. And usually those are the ones that don't last. You're like, ooh, so-and-so has a new boyfriend, and then it's they're weird with their friends, or but I have to say, the spouses of these 4 kids friends of mine, have become friends too, which is really, really cool. So we lucked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Dan, for like even like, doing the voices and stuff too. It's like, I don't know. I think at this point I'm like, you don't have to read this line. Oh, you
right.
did it. And, but
team player, man.
Team player,
like, yeah, listen, when we ask for fan questions, it's kind of a crapshoot. Like, listen, so I'm going to be honest, some of you have some great questions. Some of you, I mean, they're not bad, but it's stuff you can Google.
Yes.
And I'm like, I'm not going to take, this is value. I'm so excited that people are sharing their time. So I'm never going to take it up with something that's very easy to Google or that I know they're not going to be excited to answer. So, but thank you guys for sending those questions in, because honestly, sometimes I don't use your question, but it triggers a memory or a different question that we ask.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Dan is someone I would love to talk to him again, because I feel like, being like one of playing the protagonist in one of the biggest shows in 4Kids, I think there's still so much to talk about. And also, I think like we just barely scraped the surface with his love for comic books. And I'm like, like that.
Yeah.
But we only got so much time.
That's a separate podcast that we could do. Yeah, we're going to have to do a separate show.
Mm-hmm. But
we need 8 podcasts, because you're not on enough podcasts.
I guess not. No. But I just say that thinking like I can only imagine like how much, his fandom of comics like has influenced some of his voices or just characters or just whatever. Mm-hmm. Could die. Good
and
guy.
also he really I think we got into process more with him, like acting stuff than we have in the past, and I do enjoy that. I hope you guys don't mind listening to that. On that note, thank you to Dan. Thank you to you guys for listening. You know all the ways to find us. We will
catch you next time.
4Kids Flashback is a production of Maji Media, hosted by Tara Sands and Steve Yurko.
Producers are Zach Logan, Tara Sands, and Steve Yurko.
For more information, go to 4kidsflashback.com. That is the number 4. And if you worked at 4Kids and have a story you want to share, please email us at 4kidsflashback@gmail.com.
You can find us on social media at 4Kids Flashback, and to listen early and ad-free, head to patreon.com/4kidsflashback. For podcast merchandise, find links on our website and Linktree.
As they say on every podcast, if you liked this show, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell your friends, or 4. If you want to check out other Maji Media podcasts, go to maji.media. Thanks for listening.